Welcome to this deep dive.
It's great to be here, ready to jump in.
Today, we are really digging into the mechanics of building truly effective teams. We've been looking at sources, specifically drawing a ton from Patrick Lencioni's field guide, Overcoming the Five Dysfunctions of a Team. Think of this as a practical guide for you, a shortcut to understanding why teams struggle, and more importantly, what you can actually do about it. It's straight from the source material.
That's right. The mission for this deep dive is really to cut through all the noise, pull out the most actionable steps, maybe uncover some surprising truths about teamwork, and just give you a direct path to making your own teams function better. It's less about, abstract theory and more about facing some potentially uncomfortable realities, but for the sake of getting real results.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start right at the beginning. Why does teamwork even matter? Why prioritize it? The source makes a pretty provocative claim right out of the gate.
It really does. The argument is that teamwork is arguably the single most sustainable competitive advantage left today.
Sustainable advantage, but largely untapped, it says.
Largely untapped, yeah, which is intriguing.
It is. If it's such a massive advantage, why aren't companies everywhere just mastering it?
Well, the sources point to a couple of key reasons. One is that it's notoriously hard to measure its impact directly. On the bottom line, I mean.
Okay.
It influences so many things. Productivity, decisions, retention, innovation. It's hard to isolate it like, say, marketing spend.
So if you can't slap a clear number on it easily, it might get overlooked by executives focused on quantifiable stuff.
That seems to be the idea.
Yeah.
And the other big reason, it's just incredibly hard to achieve.
Right.
You can't buy it. You can't just hire a teamwork consultant to install it. It has to be built organically.
Yeah.
From within.
Okay, so difficult to measure and difficult to build. That definitely explains the untapped part. And the source mentions a paradox about what it takes to build it.
Ah, yes. The paradox. It's that the core principles of teamwork are actually remarkably simple. You don't need, genius-level insights or complex strategies.
Okay, so what do you need?
What they do demand, the source says, is courage and persistence.
Courage and persistence. That feels very human, not very corporate processy.
Exactly. And it's not just about the company's competitive edge. The sources make a strong case that teamwork is vital for individual fulfillment at work, too.
Really? How so?
That feeling of connection, belonging, shared purpose. The kind you get on a truly high-functioning team, that can profoundly impact your life, inside and outside the office.
So it's not just about business metrics. It's about creating a workplace where people actually feel connected and can thrive. That adds a whole other layer.
Really does. Makes it much more fundamental.
All right, let's get into the core framework then. The Five Dysfunctions model. It's presented as this simple hierarchical pyramid.
Yeah, that visual is key because it shows how they build on each other. You have to deal with the bottom layers first. You can't just jump to the top.
Makes sense. And at the very base, the foundation, or maybe the thing causing the collapse, is the absence of trust.
Right. That's the bedrock. If you don't have that, nothing else works. It all crumbles.
And if you do start building trust, what's the next dysfunction you can tackle?
Well, once you have that trust foundation, the team can start to overcome the fear of conflict. People feel safe enough to actually disagree productively.
Okay. Trust allows for healthy conflict. And mastering that conflict, that debate, then lets teams address the lack of commitment. Is that right?
Exactly. When people feel like they've actually been heard, like they've genuinely debated the issue, they're way more likely to buy into the final decision, even if it wasn't their first choice.
And once you get that commitment, that real buy-in, it makes it possible to overcome the avoidance of accountability.
Yes, because everyone's aligned on the same plan, the same standards. They feel empowered, maybe even obligated to hold each other accountable. It's not just the leader's job anymore.
Which then, finally, allows the team to conquer the dysfunction at the very peak. Inattention to results.
That's the ultimate goal. With all the other stuff handled, the team can finally focus its collective energy where it needs to be, achieving the goals they set out to achieve together, not getting sidetracked by individual stuff or, departmental politics.
And the source is really clear here. The true measure of a great team isn't just how well they get along. It's whether they actually accomplish the collective results they aimed for.
Absolutely. Performance against those shared goals. That's the ultimate scorecard.
Now, before a group even starts trying to fix these dysfunctions, the source says, hold on, you need to pause and answer two really critical questions, honestly.
Yeah, these are like non-negotiable starting points. First one, are we really a team?
What's the definition of a real team here?
It's described as a pretty small group. They suggest maybe 3 to 12 people who genuinely share common goals, rewards, responsibilities. And the key thing is interdependence. They need each other and are willing to put the group's needs first.
So if you're just a group of people reporting to the same manager, but your work isn't really intertwined, you might not be a team in this sense.
Precisely. And the source is clear. That's okay. It's fine if you're not a true team. Lots of groups aren't. But you need clarity on that. Don't try to force these intense teamwork principles onto a group that just isn't set up that way. It'll just cause frustration.
That distinction seems really important. What's the second big question?
Are we ready for heavy lifting?
Heavy lifting sounds demanding.
It is. The source doesn't sugarcoat it. Becoming a high-performing team takes considerable time and, maybe even more importantly, significant emotional energy. There aren't any shortcuts.
So no quick fixes or weekend retreats?
Not really. Yeah. Trying half measures or just paying lip service can actually make things worse. It kills credibility. Making real progress often takes weeks, months, dedicated time, maybe off-sites, regular focused work. You have to be willing to invest.
Okay, so let's say you figured out, yes, we are a team, and yes, we are ready for the heavy lifting. Where do you start? Back to the foundation. Absence of trust.
Right back to the bottom. The source calls trust the most important quality, and maybe the rarest, which is why getting it right gives such a huge competitive advantage.
And the kind of trust we're talking about here is specific, isn't it? It's not just, oh, I like Bob.
Not at all. It's vulnerability-based trust. That means team members have to be comfortable being, well, open, exposed even, vulnerable with each other about their weaknesses, their mistakes, their fears, maybe when they need help.
That sounds potentially awkward in a professional setting, maybe a bit, touchy-feely.
The source tackles that head on. It argues this kind of trust is incredibly practical, hard-nosed even.
How so?
Well, think about it. When people aren't afraid to admit the truth about themselves or their limits, they waste so much less time and energy on unproductive stuff, like office politics, covering their backsides, managing perceptions, all that self-preservation stuff, that energy drain. It's lethal for a team.
It makes me think of that story in the source, the one about the invulnerable leader.
Ah, yeah. The CEO who just couldn't or wouldn't admit any limitations or mistakes.
Right.
And because he wasn't vulnerable, nobody else on his executive team felt they could be either. So they hid problems in their own areas, made bad calls based on hidden info. And the company eventually failed. External analysts might have blamed strategy.
But the root cause was deeper.
Exactly. It was that total lack of vulnerability-based trust, starting right at the top.
So the strategic mistakes were just symptoms. Wow. Why is vulnerability so hard for people, especially at work?
It really goes back to that basic human self-preservation instinct, right? Look out for number one. But on a real team, the source says that instinct is lethal because the team is number one.
You have to shift from protecting yourself to protecting the team's goals.
Precisely. And building this trust isn't just about time spent together or, like, doing trust falls. The source says the key ingredient isn't time, it's courage.
Courage. To be vulnerable first.
Yes. The courage to take that risk, to open up without knowing for sure if it'll be respected or reciprocated. Someone has to go first.
That definitely takes guts. Okay, so how do you actually start building this kind of trust? The source gives some practical tools. The first one is the personal histories exercise.
Yeah, this one sounds simple, but it's designed to build just a comfortable, moderate level of vulnerability. Everyone just goes around and shares a few basic things: where they grew up, number of siblings, birth order, and one relatively easy to share childhood challenge.
So not like deep therapy secrets, just a little bit about what shaped you.
Right. Enough to give your colleagues a glimpse of the person behind the job title. The source tells a couple of powerful stories about this. One was a guy sharing that his brother was murdered when he was 8. Yeah. And a teammate who'd worked side by side with him for 9 years was just stunned. He had no idea about this huge event in his friend's life.
9 years. That really shows how little we might know about people we work with every day.
It really does. Another story involved a woman who rarely smiled, seemed kind of distant. During the exercise, she talked about a really tough childhood. And suddenly her peers saw her quietness, not as disinterest, but as like a learned coping mechanism.
That instantly builds empathy, doesn't it? It sounds like this helps fight that thing called the fundamental attribution error.
Exactly that. It's that tendency we all have, right? To judge others' negative actions based on their character. They're late because they're irresponsible, but excuse our own actions based on circumstances. I'm late because traffic was awful.
So we judge them for who they are, but excuse ourselves for what happened.
You got it. Hearing even small bits of someone's background helps you see them as a whole person, shaped by things. You're less likely to jump to harsh judgments. The source suggests facilitating it gently, but says truly negative reactions are actually quite rare.
Okay, so personal histories builds that initial vulnerability. What's another tool?
Behavioral profiling. Using validated tools like Myers-Briggs or DISC, something objective.
How does taking a personality test help with trust?
It gives people a neutral framework and language. It makes it easier to admit strengths and weaknesses. Because it's not just you saying, I'm bad at details. It's the profile suggesting people with this preference might need to focus more on details. It depersonalizes it a bit.
So feedback can be framed around the profile, making it less like a personal attack.
Exactly. Hey, knowing your profile leans towards big picture thinking, maybe we need to consciously build in a check for the details on this project. The process involves everyone taking it, learning the model, sharing their profile, and crucially, the leader has to share theirs too. Vulnerability again.
The leader models it. What's the typical impact?
The source describes things like guardedness, just melting, laughter, relief, people getting clarity on themselves and others, and understanding the team's collective tendencies, strengths, and blind spots.
It sounds like these tools create a safer space for people to just be seen, warts and all, which is needed for trust.
It is. And there's one last really critical point the source makes about trust. Unanimity is key.
Unanimity, meaning even one holdout can wreck it.
Profoundly. If even one person on the team is unwilling or unable to be genuinely open about weaknesses, mistakes, needs, it drastically affects everyone else's ability to trust. The leader has to be willing to address that directly.
And potentially remove them.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It's tough, but the source tells a story of a CEO who had to let go of a sales VP who just wouldn't engage in vulnerability. And the team's performance and trust improved dramatically, almost overnight. That one person's unwillingness was poisoning the well.
Wow. Okay, so trust requires courage, leader modeling, maybe tough decisions. It's truly foundational. Once you have that, you can move up to tackling the fear of conflict.
Right. Trust is the absolute prerequisite. You need that safety net to engage in the kind of unfiltered, passionate debate around issues that high-performing teams need.
And the source insists that if your team discussions aren't making people a bit uncomfortable sometimes, you're probably leaving better decisions on the table.
That's a key sign. Productive conflict isn't always polite. An outsider watching a great team debate might actually think they're fighting.
It could look intense. So how do teams get good at this healthy, constructive conflict?
Several ways mentioned. One is conflict profiling. Understanding how individuals on the team naturally approach conflict. Are they avoiders, seekers, debaters?
Knowing the tendencies. What else?
Conflict norming. This is where the team explicitly agrees on the rules of engagement. How will we disagree? What's okay, what's not? Write them down. Refer back to them. The leader guides it, but the team creates them together.
Setting clear ground rules makes the difficult conversations feel safer.
It helps a lot. Another key technique, especially for the leader, is mining for conflict.
Mining, like digging for gold.
Kind of. It means actively looking for buried disagreements or unspoken tensions and bringing them out into the open. The leader has to be willing to gently stir the pot sometimes to make sure important stuff gets discussed, not avoided just because it's awkward.
You have to deliberately surface the potential issues.
Right. And when those debates do get heated or uncomfortable, the leader can use real-time permission.
What's that look like?
It's the leader basically saying out loud, okay, this feels tense, and that's okay. This is actually what we need to be doing. This is good. Let's keep going. Apparently, people feel a real sense of relief when the leader validates the difficult process.
Acknowledging the discomfort, but encouraging it.
Exactly. The source also really hits on the importance in meetings. So often, meetings lack conflict, which makes them boring and leads to bad decisions because people don't speak up. Meetings need some kind of hook early on, something to raise the stakes and get people invested in the debate.
Inject some productive tension.
You got it.
Yeah.
And finally, recognizing conflict resolution obstacles. Sometimes a debate gets stuck, not because of the issue itself, but because of the other stuff. Maybe the environment, maybe past history between two people, maybe someone's just having a bad day. Acknowledging those distractions can help refocus on the core issue.
Okay, trust enables conflict, which needs norms and brave leaders. This leads to the next dysfunction, lack of commitment.
And that unfiltered conflict is exactly what allows teams to get genuine buy-in. When people feel they've had their say, debated it fully, they commit.
And commitment here means two things, right? Buy-in and clarity.
Yes, buy-in is that honest emotional support for a decision. But here's a super important distinction the source makes.
Which is?
Commitment is not consensus. Great teams don't need everyone to agree 100%. They master the art of disagree and commit.
Disagree and commit.
Yeah. Debate passionately, maybe even argue against the final decision. But once the decision is made, everyone gets behind it 100%, as if it was their own idea all along.
That requires serious discipline. What's the leader's role here?
Crucial. The leader has to be good at pulling out all the different opinions, making sure everyone feels heard. Then they need the guts to actually make the call, knowing it might not be unanimous.
And that surprising thing about buy-in.
It's that most people honestly just need to feel their ideas were heard, understood, and considered. They don't necessarily need their specific idea to be chosen to commit to the final plan, as long as the reasoning is clear.
Just being heard and understood is often enough. That's powerful.
It really is. The second part of commitment is clarity. Removing assumptions. Getting rid of ambiguity about what was actually decided.
And the source had that great story. The tech company hiring freeze.
Classic example. Executive team meets, decides on a hiring freeze. HR sends the email. Minutes later, executives who were in the meeting are asking, wait, that doesn't apply to my department, does it?
Same meeting, same decision, totally different understandings. That guarantees failure.
Total confusion. Exactly. It cripples execution.
So how do you get clarity?
Two key tools suggested. One is commitment clarification. End meetings by explicitly writing down the decisions made. On a whiteboard, whatever. Okay, just so we're all clear, we decided X, Y, and Z. Bob will do A by Tuesday. Any questions?
Don't leave it vague.
Never. The other tool is cascading communication. Team members commit to communicating the key decisions to their own direct reports within, say, 24 hours.
And ideally, not just by email.
Right. Ideally, live, quick chat, phone call so people can ask questions. This is smart because it creates accountability in the meeting. If you know you have to explain this decision to your team tomorrow, you're much more likely to ask clarifying questions or voice concerns during the meeting itself. Remember the pharma company travel cut story? That's what happens when this fails.
So the communication plan forces better commitment up front.
It really does. And beyond just tactical decisions, teams need commitment to core principles, too. Behavioral norms, purpose, strategy, goals. A specific tool here is the thematic goal.
Thematic goal.
Yeah. Identifying one single overarching priority for the team for a set period, maybe 3 months, maybe 12. Something everyone can rally around, no matter their department. It helps fight that specialist dilemma. Why should the head of legal care about market share?
Because it's the team's #1 goal for this quarter.
Precisely. And then supporting objective define how each function contributes to that big goal.
Okay. Trust, conflict, commitment, clarity brings us to layer 4. Avoidance of accountability.
Yes. And that foundation of commitment is what makes accountability possible. People feel empowered to hold each other responsible for sticking to those decisions and standards.
And the goal isn't just top-down accountability from the leader.
Definitely not. The real power comes from peer-to-peer accountability, leveraging that natural desire people have not to let down their colleagues.
But the leader still plays a big part.
Absolutely critical. The leader has to model it by being willing to enter the danger.
Enter the danger. What does that mean?
It means being willing to have the uncomfortable conversations, addressing behavioral issues or performance problems directly. The source points out many leaders are way more comfortable talking about missed numbers than about, say, someone undermining colleagues or constantly checking their phone in meetings.
Even though the behavior might be the root cause of the poor results?
Often it is. And if the team sees the leader letting bad behavior slide,
they won't step up either. Why should they?
Exactly. Why play the heavy if the boss won't? The source tells stories about CEOs ignoring blatant issues like rumor mongering or disrespect. That just signals accountability isn't real.
It gives permission for bad behavior. And even on teams with good intentions, people might hesitate to give peer feedback, right? Don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah, they worry about damaging relationships.
Yeah.
But the source argues you need to reframe it. Not giving constructive feedback is actually the unkind thing to do. You're letting your teammate down, you're letting the team down.
So avoiding the discomfort is actually more harmful in the long run.
That's the argument. A really potent tool for fostering peer accountability is the team effectiveness exercise, TE.
This sounds intense.
It is. And it definitely needs a baseline of trust already established. Basically, everyone writes down for every other team member the single most important behavior that contributes to the team's success and the single most important behavior that detracts or holds the team back.
One positive, one negative behavioral observation for each peer.
Yes. Then you go around the room. Each person shares their feedback. For the person whose turn, it's positives first, then negatives. The receiver just listens, takes notes, and then summarizes their key takeaways and what they commit to working on.
Wow. Delivering that feedback directly takes vulnerability. Receiving it takes resilience.
It does. But the source says it works because it's fast-paced. The leader goes first to model it. The feedback is behavioral and simple, and it leads to real insight and commitments for improvement.
Cuts through the noise.
It really does. Other simpler tactics include maybe a lightning round at the start of meetings for priorities and regularly reviewing a team scoreboard to keep accountability front and center.
Which leads us perfectly to the top of the pyramid, inattention to results.
Right. Even if a team nails trust, conflict, commitment, and accountability, they can still fail if they lose sight of the ultimate goal, achieving collective results.
And what's the main thing that pulls them off track?
Fundamentally, it's human self-interest. That little voice saying, yeah, but what about me, my career, my department?
So even with a strong foundation, individual needs can still sabotage the collective focus.
It's a constant pull. That's why the source stresses eliminating ambiguity about success with a clear, objective scoreboard. What does winning look like for this team right now? How will we measure it? Pick one or two key things, not a dashboard of 50 metrics.
Make the goal undeniable and measurable.
Exactly. Avoid fuzzy measures like, is the CEO happy or do we feel good? Results-focused teams use objective data. The argument is, when teams stop focusing on that shared scoreboard, they will focus on something else. And that something else is rarely the team's collective good.
Like those examples, Scottie Pippen chasing individual stats after Jordan left, or the chief scientist focused on his own pay package.
Yeah. Their focus shifted from, how does the team win, to how do I win, even if it hurt the team overall. The source highlights a few key distractions.
The first big one is ego.
The ultimate killer, it says. Prioritizing your individual status, your recognition, your win over the team's win. Truly great teams aren't happy unless everyone is contributing and the team is succeeding.
What else distracts from results?
Career development and money. Totally normal needs, but they have to be discussed openly, which takes trust, and not allowed to become the primary driver that eclipses the team's goals.
And the last one seems really common in big companies.
It is the team #1 dilemma. This is when a leader prioritizes the team they lead, their department, over the team they belong to, their peer leadership team.
Putting your own direct reports and functional goals ahead of the senior team's collective goals.
Exactly. It feels natural. You hire those people, you feel responsible for them. But the source says it's incredibly damaging. It creates silos, politics, and ironically, it hurts the employees down the line because their boss isn't being a good teammate on the level above, fighting for the whole system.
That makes total sense. Dysfunction at the top trickles down.
Always. True teamwork, the source compares it to a family sometimes, involves sacrifice for the group. Achievement is collective. The tools built overcoming the other dysfunctions are what enable this focus on results.
So the pyramid isn't just problems, it's the solution path.
Exactly. You build the foundation to reach the peak.
Now, the source is pretty practical. It anticipates a lot of the real-world questions and pushback people get when they try this stuff.
Yeah, like, how long does this actually take? And the honest answer is, it varies. It's an ongoing process, like tending a garden. Depends on commitment, time, team history, leader strength, all that. But you can see big progress in maybe 2-3 months with real effort, sometimes faster.
What about team size? Is there a magic number?
The recommendation is strongly for 3 to 12 people, any larger. And building real trust gets really hard. Interaction drops off. Discussion becomes less about inquiry, more about just stating your position.
Less conversation, more speeches.
Pretty much. Then the tricky one. Will we have to fire someone? The source says it's not standard, but the leader's willingness to address issues, potentially leading to removal, actually makes it less likely to happen. People step up when they know the leader is serious.
But sometimes it is necessary for the team to move forward.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
It's acknowledged as a possibility.
What about a 2-day offsite? Can you really achieve much?
A lot, potentially.
Yeah.
But it has to be focused, intense work on the dysfunctions, trust exercises, conflict norming, commitment clarification, not just golf and bonding.
Hard work, not a vacation. Should you use an outside facilitator?
It can be hugely helpful if you find a good one who knows the model. It frees the leader up to be a participant, not the process manager. Yes, it costs money, but the cost of ongoing dysfunction is usually way higher.
The source also hits common objections head on, like, we're too busy, can't take 2 days.
The counter is, how much time are you already wasting because of dysfunction? Bad meetings, politics, redoing decisions. It's the adrenaline addiction, hook on urgency, never fixing the root causes.
Or this is just touchy-feely HR stuff.
Acknowledge the concern if it feels that way, but then pivot. This model, while involving vulnerabilities, laser-focused on business results, better decisions, higher productivity, lower turnover, is practical, not just nice.
And the classic, just another flavor of the month initiative.
This one's all on the leader. They have to commit, model the behavior, follow through consistently. If the team sniffs out that the leader isn't serious, they'll just wait it out.
Beyond objections, there are specific obstacles to avoid.
Yeah, things that will actively sabotage you. Number 1, the leader isn't really committed. You might make some progress if a skeptical leader is willing to try, but deep change. Unlikely without their genuine buy-in and example. Giving them the victory it is often suggested.
What if some team members just won't engage? Passive resistance.
Address it directly. Don't let it fester. Call it out, gently but firmly. It's like a game of chicken. The leader can't blink first. Sometimes confronting it breaks the logjam.
What about the opposite? Someone who dominates every conversation.
First, try to figure out why. Is it just their style, or are they trying to control things or avoid vulnerability? Profiling helps with style. Gentle coaching for talkers. Maybe more direct feedback if it feels manipulative.
Geographically dispersed teams, that's tougher.
Definitely harder. Technology helps, but the source insists there's no substitute for real face-to-face time for the core trust-building, conflict, and commitment activities. You just can't replicate that deep connection entirely over Zoom.
The disruptive top performer. High results, but toxic behavior.
Always tough. But you have to address it. Their negative impact on everyone else often outweighs their individual contribution. Try coaching first, but be prepared to make a change if they won't adapt. Often, everyone else blossoms when that person leaves.
And finally, team members with multiple allegiances, torn loyalties.
Back to the team #1 problem. You need clarity. Which team is their primary commitment in this context? The leaders involved need to make that call explicit. Don't leave the individual caught in the middle.
These are all very real challenges people face.
Absolutely. And the source offers a kind of team-building roadmap as a sample, maybe laying out sessions over 6 months.
But just as a guide, right? Not a rigid prescription.
Exactly. Use it as a flexible framework. The big takeaway is that this isn't a project with an end date. It's an ongoing process, like maintaining a marriage or any important relationship. It needs constant attention, effort, and checking in.
So there we have it, a deep dive into Lencioni's model, the 5 dysfunctions, starting with that absolute need for vulnerability-based trust.
Moving through mastering healthy conflict, getting real commitment and clarity, building peer-to-peer accountability.
And culminating in that relentless focus on collective results.
We've seen how courage is essential for trust, how uncomfortable debate is often necessary for progress, how commitment means buy-in and clarity, not just consensus.
How accountability really needs to be peer-driven, and how team results have to trump everything else, especially individual ego or agendas.
And we touched on those practical tools. Personal histories, behavioral profiling, the T, plus navigating all those real-world hurdles like time, skepticism, difficult people, remote work.
It seems the core message from the sources is that building these truly great teams, while conceptually simple, takes real courage, real persistence. It means leaning into discomfort.
Yeah, the discomfort seems to be the price of entry for getting those breakthrough results. It's simple, but definitely not easy.
Okay, here's something to think about as you leave this deep dive. If the sources are right, if teamwork is this huge untapped advantage, but unlocking it means deliberately walking into uncomfortable territory, vulnerability, conflict, confronting self-interest, what does that suggest about the potential just sitting there untapped in your own teams, or even in the difficult conversations you might be avoiding elsewhere in your life?